Okay, we are live. Good afternoon and welcome to everybody. My name is Leon Natker. I am the Executive Director of the New Mexico Holocaust Museum and Gellert Center for Education, and we are here to reopen our museum in a newly renovated form, and also to reopen it after in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and do it correctly and safely for everybody so that people can come and enjoy the museum and learn from the experiences that are presented here. I want to start by thanking the people that were responsible for helping us get this place renovated. First of all, to my staff, to the designers of the new space and the new graphics, Mario Griego and Jack Montgomery, and then to my staff that have corrected me and kept me on track from everything from missing a comma to going, I think there's a better way to do this particular exhibit, and that would be Camelia Catton Garcia, our collections manager, my co-curator and researcher Daniel Teradash, our videographer and recorder Reinhard Lorenz, who is actually producing this particular broadcast, and of course to my ever faithful assistant and director of administration, Lynn Berner. In addition, we have also had a myriad of volunteers who have done unbelievable work, physical labor of all kinds, and they have been headed by our volunteer coordinator, Larry Malik, and they include Nick Estrada, Tien Am, Brenda and Hal, Hagar and Nick Poe, Hayden Fenner, Juan Martinez, and John Cornish. Without John, nothing would have ever happened here. Believe me, he did everything from taking down old walls to putting up new walls. So that's all very, very important to us, and none of this kind of an effort on the part of a museum or a not-for-profit organization ever happens in a vacuum. It's not one person's work, it is the work of many, many people, and I thank them all. And when you get a chance to visit our museum, I hope that you will take the chance, if you meet any of them, to thank them as well. I also want to thank our board of directors for their support in this effort. They are, the executive committee is surrounding me, let's see, where is everybody here? Our treasurer, Jenny Nagan, our secretary, Gloria Teradash, our vice president, Sherry Carmiol, and of course our president, Ray Cohen, who I am now going to pass the microphone to for a brief introduction to our proceedings. So you'll have to bear with us as we have to do this all very, let's see, okay. Okay.
Okay. Hi to everyone. Welcome you to the New Mexico Holocaust Museum and the Gellert Center for Education. My name is Ray Cohen, and as Leon introduced me, I'm president of the board. I want to welcome you to our newly redesigned space, our new exhibits, and our renewed emphasis on education. Our mission is to shine a light on acts of hate and intolerance by educating and building communities of upstanders through our newly designed space, our exhibits, our education outreach, and through our collaboration with different communities. This is how we accomplish our work. We have education programs for those whom we serve about the Holocaust and other genocides, so that we can promote social justice and a respect for the rights of all, to build an informed citizenry, one that is compassionate, understanding, and responsible towards others in their community, our nation, and the world. When I thought about what I would say, the lyrics of a song that seems now so long ago is what played in my head. Teach our children well. And that is our goal. In these troubling times that we live in, our message is needed now more than ever. Our K-12 education outreach programs are now well established and well received in the schools where they are. We need your help to expand our reach and establish ourselves in more schools so that we can provide educational outreach programs across the entire state of New Mexico. I ask you to please donate generously to this mission. It is important now, more than ever, that our children understand and take care of each other, that no one is other in this world. We are all one humanity. And I hope that you enjoy this program and a tour of the museum that will be provided as part of it. Thank you. Oh, right.
Take this back.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things our museum is currently doing, and that I hope you will support in the future, is working in collaboration with the city of Albuquerque in securing a permanent home for the museum that has enough space to accommodate all of the exhibits we would like to do and all of the education programs that we have to do. And in line with this, we have a greeting from the mayor of Albuquerque, the Honorable Tim Keller.
Hi, my name is Tim Keller, Mayor of Albuquerque, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to celebrate the reopening of the New Mexico Holocaust Museum. You know, the city's done a lot of work towards trying to have our city be safe and equitable, but part of that is breaking down our own history of racism, and this is something that the museum has been so helpful with. For us, this museum, really since 2001, has brought through education and anti-discrimination and anti-bullying efforts, even in our school district and in our city. They have really shown us how to be a better city and a better community. And right now, there are two new exhibits that are especially important during these times. The first one is the effects of colonization on our native populations. And when we think about what our city's been through, especially with the Oñate statue and this dialogue, this exhibit is so important for every New Mexican to see. The second one is phase 2 of slavery in America, which covers the history of our Black Americans after the Civil War, but really Reconstruction through World War II. This is, of course, hugely important for everything that's being discussed in the context of the Black Lives Matter movement. And it's a lot of the history that even myself, I didn't learn growing up here in New Mexico, because history kind of stopped around the turn of the century. And so this is really, really important for us. And we're so glad the New Mexico Holocaust Museum is sharing this with the community. Congrats on reopening, and I look forward to seeing the exhibits.
Okay. One of the exhibits that's brand new to the museum is one on colonization. It's the effects of colonization, both Spanish and American, on the native populations of New Mexico. And speaking because of the importance of this exhibit, we have a message from Congresswoman Deb Holland's office that will be delivered by her assistant, Brenda McKenna.
Sensamu. Umpagindi. Good day. My name is Brenda Ogoathe McKenna, and I'm from Nambe Owinge here in New Mexico. I serve Congresswoman Holland and her constituents as a field representative in her district office here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I am honored to read Congresswoman's statement for the New Mexico Holocaust Museum. Thank you for inviting me to be with you today at the New Mexico Holocaust Museum to help open Colonialization, Racism and Resilience, a study of the history of the subjugation of the native populations of New Mexico. I regret I'm unable to be there to witness this grand opening with you today. I applaud you for honoring our ancestors. I'm a 35th generation Native American from Laguna Pueblo. I'm proud to be one of the 2 Native American women to represent New Mexico after 235 years without any Indigenous female representation in the halls of Congress. Representative Sharice Davids and I are advocating not only for our respective constituents in Kansas and New Mexico, respectively, but helping to ensure Native Americans are at the tables of discussion and representing their tribes and nations in the nation's capital. It's been said, look at who's writing the historical texts before concluding the content is the truth. One too many texts perpetuate the idea that we are an inferior race and going extinct. That false narrative has tried to silence our voices. We are here and our culture has survived. Thank you, Mr. Leon Nadker, Executive Director, museum staff, volunteers, and patrons for helping to ensure our voices are not silenced, for promoting the truth and enlightening all who will visit.
Last year at our annual gala, which unfortunately we cannot have this year due to COVID-19, we started a tradition of giving an award for the Upstander of the Year. That award was given to our State Treasurer, Brian Colon, and now we have a message from Brian Colon as our Upstander of the Year, and this is a tradition that we hope to continue on with very soon, and I am very grateful to Brian for taking the time to record a message for us.
What an incredible day for New Mexico. Today, the day that we unveil the new exhibit at the Holocaust Museum of New Mexico and Gellert Education Center. My name is Brian Colon. I'm the State Auditor of New Mexico, but today is very personal for me. It's personal for me because being born Jewish and being raised at the synagogue here in Albuquerque, going to Hebrew school at B'nai Israel, I understand personally the importance of educating our community when it comes to the Holocaust experience and the lived journey of generations of Jewish people. But in fact, today we continue to write the next chapter of embracing our diversity and telling our story. The Holocaust Museum tells our story better than anyone else. And today this exhibit, as it's unveiled virtually, as we anticipate in the future being able to go to the museum again. And with that, we want to say thanks to the Board of Directors for its vision. We want to say thanks to the governor and the legislature for the capital outlay so that someday, in the not too distant future, we'll enjoy a permanent home for the Holocaust Museum of New Mexico. As I sit here today, I know that I take great pride in having been named last year as the Upstander of the Year for the Holocaust Museum. It was a humbling experience knowing that my family takes great pride in that accolade. And I think today, as we unveil this exhibit, I think it's important that we all strive to be upstanders and not bystanders. For far too long, we believed that being able to stand up and say, I'm not a racist, that was enough. But now in the year 2020, in the time and place that we're in, we know that we can't just settle for saying I'm not a racist. We have to be anti-racism. And each and every day as we strive to be anti-racism, we know that that's exactly the mission of the Holocaust Museum of New Mexico and Gellert Education Center. That in fact, that is the place where the story will be told when we stand by and are just bystanders. But instead, we will no longer be bystanders. We will be upstanders. We'll lift up our community. We'll embrace our diversity. We'll no longer tolerate racism in our community. And I know that this is a place not just to tell a story, but to educate future generations of New Mexicans so that we can embrace a beautiful future for generations to come. I close with gratitude for this exhibit. I close with gratitude to all the visionaries who established the Holocaust Museum of New Mexico, and I thank those who continue to invest in a bright future as we tell our story and we educate generations to come. Thank you for joining us as we unveil virtually this incredible exhibit at the Holocaust Museum of New Mexico.
When I was planning the renovation of the museum, one of the artifacts that I really wanted to display well was one of the Czech Torahs. These Sifrim Torah were stolen by Goering and Hitler during the war from all of the synagogues in Czechoslovakia, which they subsequently burned. The idea was they were going to create a repository of artifacts to create a museum of the extinct race after the war was over. Fortunately, this did not happen, and the British Army discovered the cache of scrolls and other artifacts at the conclusion of the war and moved them to England, where many of them still remain. However, throughout the years since the World War II, these scrolls and artifacts have been distributed to various synagogues and museums on permanent loan for safekeeping and to be displayed as reminders. And part of our new exhibit on survivors, which includes survivors' testimony, has several artifacts, and one of them is this Sefer Torah. And I wanted to have it displayed properly, and I was having coffee with Rick Hammer one afternoon, and mentioned this, and he said, I think my family would be interested in providing a new case for the Torah. So today we are dedicating that case that has been donated so very, very generously by the Hammer family, the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of survivors of the Holocaust. And I'm here to dedicate the new case for this Sefer Torah, which is, as I understand it from the repository in England, this particular scroll is approximately 185 to 195 years old. So it has survived a great deal in its life, and I would like to now introduce the Hammer family, Rick, Karen, and their children, and Rabbi Dov Gartenberg from Congregation B'nai Israel. And we have to change microphones again, so give us just a second here. So, Rabbi, you come up, and I think just put this on your lapel.
I'd like to share the Hammer family story. Sander Alexander Hammer emigrated from Hungary to the United States in 1938 and married Jeanette Kasser of Trenton, New Jersey. He left behind his mother, Eugenia, Jenny, father Shamu, Samuel, sister Margit, her husband Jula Kirshner, and their young son, also named Sander. The Kirshners were both physicians, practicing in the small village of Tab in central Hungary. Although subject to anti-Semitic laws under a fascist Hungarian regime, the Hammers and Kirshners were generally unmolested until April 1944, when Nazi deportations began. Sometime between May and November of 1944, Margit and her 7-year-old boy, Sander, were deported to Auschwitz. Jula was forced to work at a typhus hospital and died there of the disease. Samuel was shot by the Arrow Cross, the Hungarian Nazis, on the banks of the Danube River, and his body pushed into the river. Jenny survived to the end of the war in the Budapest ghetto and lived out her life in the U.S., passing away in 1960. This display is a gift from Jeanette and Alexander's children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. What I'd like to do is to share a prayer associated deeply with the Sefer Torah. After all, the Sefer Torah is the holiest object that we have in the synagogue. And this has been rescued. One of the important responsibilities of Jewish communities to protect their Sifrei Torah, their books of Torah. So I'd like to do the Be'ana Rechetz, which is a prayer in the Torah service, which speaks specifically of the holiness of the Torah and the holiness of the lives we've just mentioned. Be'ana Rachetz, Be'ana Rachetz, V'lishmei Kadisha Yakira, Ayla Layla Yana, Amartush Bechan, Be'ana May it please you, God, to open our hearts to your Torah, answer our prayers and the prayers of all your people Israel for goodness, for life, and for peace. I would also like to share something about the holiness of the Torah from the great philosopher of Judaism, Maimonides. And I'd like to do this in the form of reading the two first Mishnayot, or teachings, in his great code, the Mishnah Torah, again to convey to all our friends the holiness of the Torah and the reverence we give toward it. So Maimonides writes, it is an affirmative precept that it is a mitzvah binding upon every individual Israelite to write a scroll of the law for its own use. As it is said, now therefore write ye this song for you, in Deuteronomy 31. As the Torah is not written in separate sections, this text means write for yourselves the Torah in which this song, a particular prayer a song called Ha'azinu, is contained. Even if one's ancestors have left a person a scroll, it is a religious duty to write a scroll at his own expense. If he wrote it with his own hand, it is counted to him as if he received it from Mount Sinai. If one does not know how to write a scroll, he should get others to write it for him. He who corrects a scroll, even a single letter of it, is regarded as if he had written it completely. And second teachings about the ancient institution of the king and the king's responsibility to be guided by the Torah. That is, the Torah symbolizes in Judaism the rule of law, the rule of a humane law. And so Maimonides goes on. A king has the duty of writing for himself another scroll of the law in his capacity as sovereign, in addition to the scroll which he owns in his private capacity. As it is said, and it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write himself a copy of this law, in Deuteronomy 17. This copy is corrected by comparison with a scroll kept in the temple court and under the authority of the supreme judicature. The scroll which the king has possessed when he was a private individual, he places in his archives. The one that he wrote or had written for him when he became king should always be with him. If he goes to war, the scroll is to be with him. When he enters his home, it is to be with him. When he hears a cause or tries a case, it is to be with him. When he sits down to a meal, it is to be placed before him. As it is said, and it shall be with him, and he shall read therein all the days of his life. This Torah, rescued from the Holocaust, is a preservation of a holy book which a scribe prepared over a year's time, which someone either purchased for himself or herself or gave to a synagogue for the public reading of the Torah. In that sense, even though it is not in use in the synagogue, it is still a holy object in this beautiful case which we can admire, and its survival is symbolic of the survival of the Jewish people. In respect to that, I'm going to now chant an El Malei Rachamim, a prayer for those who perished in the Shoah and the Holocaust. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamse Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Ashchina, B'malal Kedoshim Etorim Ezohar Akiyat Mazhirim Et Nishmot, Kol Acheinu B'nei Yisrael, Anashim, Nashim V'taf, Shenitbachu, V'shenechetneku, Shenisrafu, Shenehegu, Shehalchu L'olamam. Began Eden Tihi Menuchatam, Ana Bala Rachamim Astirem, Beseter Kanafecha Olamim, Usur B'tzur HaChaim Et Nishmotechem, Adonai Hu Nachalatam, Yanuchu V'shalom, Al B'zurei Mishkevotechem, V'nomar Amen. El Melech Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the souls of all our people, the men, women, and children of Israel who were slaughtered, who were gassed, who were burned to ashes, who were wrenched out of this world and have now gone to their eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved ones find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life. May they rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. I conclude with one final quote that also reminds us of our duties, of our memory. Remember, it didn't start with gas chambers. It started with politicians dividing the people with us versus them. It started with intolerance and hate speech, and when people stopped caring, became desensitized and turned a blind eye. May this Sefer Torah be a source of life and source of hope and source of action. And let us say, Amen.
Rabbi, thank you so much. Again, on behalf of the Holocaust Museum Board of Directors, staff, and volunteers, I want to thank the Hammer family for this very, very generous donation. A little round of applause for them. It is on view. We are on view as long as we maintain social distancing, wear masks, and use gloves when listening to our various devices here in the museum. You can visit our museum Tuesday through Sunday from 11 o'clock to 4 p.m. We hope you will join us. There will be a virtual tour put online in the next day or so. Reinhard Lorenz, our videographer, is going to produce that with me, and I hope you will use it as an inspiration for future work and support of the museum, and also as a teaser so that you will come and see what we actually have on display at the museum and what we're going to do for the future for the community of Albuquerque and for the whole state of New Mexico. Thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you here in person soon.